Good evening, everyone. Come on in. Come on in the space. Let me know you can see me, you can hear me, that you're here. We have an awesome show for you tonight. Come on in the room. Let me know if you can hear me. Hold on. Let me make sure I set it so I can see your post. All right. Hey, Teresa. Good evening. Good evening. Hey, Rashida. It's been a minute. How you doing, my sister? All right. Good to see you in the room. Come on in. Come on in the room. I don't know why I have to do that almost every episode, but I do. Come on in. We have an awesome show for you tonight. It is May. It's still Mental Health Awareness Month. May. Hey, Kirk. May is still National Foster Care Month, and so we're thinking about all of these things, right? That's what Teacher's Rants and Musings is about. We reflect. Hey, Katina. We reflect, and I should be saying Reverend and Doctor. Okay, we got the powerhouses in the house tonight. Okay. But this is what we do on Teacher's Rants and Musings, right? We reflect, we rant about things that is going on, about social justice, the Black community, faith, all of this stuff we talk about, we rant about, but we try to keep it, hey, Sister Cheryl, we try to keep it in the context of what the world is doing and talking about, right? So I try to keep up with what the month represents so that we can start bringing more of these conversations to the forefront. You never really hear anyone talk about foster care, right? Or talk about adoption, or talk about some of these things. We know it happens. We know they exist. Hey, Kristen, our resident therapist is in the space. We know these things exist, but we don't really talk about them. So this is what I want us to do and be about at Teacher's Rants and Musings, where we have the conversations that people forget to have. So please tag friends, have people come in and join you. Hey, Deirdre. Oh, girl, I need you to be on my show next week. I'm going to reach out to you because Deirdre Oliver's in the house, and she has a whole organization called the Empowerment Zone. Okay, so we got to get you on this show, my dear, because she can talk at length and educate us about the foster care system, adoption, aging out, all of that good stuff, because that's the work that she does. So I hope she'll be available soon, so we can have her on the show as well. But I bring these things to light, and even if they're not directly the same, they're in my heart. Right? They're in my heart. I grew up with kids who were in care. So all of this is in my heart. Well, it's 9:03. Yeah, you guys know how I do. I don't care who's on, who's not. I like to get started, give our guests as much time as possible. But if you is scrolling, now's the time to stop scrolling. You hear me? And come on in the room so you can hear this episode, okay? And join in with us. Let's get started. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Teacher's Rants and Musings. I am delighted that you have decided to join us. Like I said, tag a friend, invite somebody to come in, be a part of the live show and the dialogue. Today we are talking about on being adopted, right? And I was just talking about how it's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's also National Foster Care Month. And I remember, so if some of you may or may not know, I grew up with 17 foster children over a decade. My mother is a social worker. My father was a pastor. So they literally brought their work home. Okay, that's what I used to tell them. You really brought the work home with you. And so I grew up with kids in care. And it was always that desire to be adopted, right? It was always the desire to be adopted. And many of you may not have known, I was looking into adoption because I was dealing with infertility. So adoption was something that I really was looking into, and unfortunately, I decided not to. What's interesting is even in the pandemic, I reached out to New Jersey's, I forget what they're called, but it used to be DIFAs, right? To see, because I'm thinking there's got to be some kids who, the influx in care now has to have gone up, that needs a loving home, that wants to be with someone who can love and protect them. Child, they told me we only doing kinship. Now, let me be clear. I used to be a foster care case manager too. All them kinship homes ain't always the best. Grandma is the reason mama was a crackhead, and now the grandchildren about to be messed up too. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, so adoption and the idea of adoption has been in my heart, has been in my mind. My special guest tonight, she's no stranger to the show. She's helped us. She's been on before. We've talked about reconciliation with her. But part of her testimony is that she has been adopted. Now, she didn't come through the foster care system. So let me be clear. She was not in the system. But we never even talk about adoption in general. We don't talk about it. We just assume it. Or we see people show up to church with children, and it's like, oh, congratulations. But nobody talks about what goes into being adopted, what that might mean, right? We look at it as just a blessing for the couple that really wanted a baby and now they have one. But we don't necessarily talk about, well, what does it mean for the people who have been adopted? We just assume there's all fun and games, and I'm not saying it's not, but let's have the conversation. So help me welcome in the space. Hey, Donna. Oh, Sister Pastor Mosley said she was adopted, so we gotta be careful. Listen, let's talk about it. At least we can have the conversation. Please help me welcome Dr. Torise Hiller.
Good
evening.
Can you hear me?
I can hear a lot of someone talking in your background.
Can you hear it? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but I can hear a man talking as well. Like there's something either playing in the background or...
Okay, I'm taking it off now.
Well, while you're doing that...
All right, you good now? Good now?
I think it's better. I think that's better.
Now?
Yes.
All right, good.
Hear it. Okay, awesome. Welcome back, Dr.
Welcome.
We are glad to have you, and you heard me setting it up. Now, again, You guys, she's a reverend. She's a adjunct professor. Okay, she's an author. She has her own ministry as well, where she does a lot of healing work also, and we've partnered in that. You guys seen her on the show to partner in the healing journey, and it's called A Place to Consider. So we will give you all of the information how you can reach her. But tonight she's here to just talk to us about the idea of being adopted and the emotions that go with it, right? Because so much that can entail that we have no clue about, those of us who've never experienced that. So tell us first how the journey started for you.
Well, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay with the earphones? Can you hear me good? Good. So thank you for having me, Minister Tisa Joyner. So it's so good to be back on your platform. Tisa's Ranking to Music, such a great place to be here. But my journey started really early. I am one of a set of triplets, and so we were adopted early on.
Wait. You said that real fast. You said you are one of what?
I am a triplet, so I'm the middle child. So there are three of us, and we were all adopted at the same time. That was my mother's stipulations, that we would not be separated, and so that was a blessing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I don't think I ever, and you know this, I say this all the time, I don't know other triplets. Right? You're the only triplet I know in my life. You see it on TV, but never met twins, of course, but never met triplets, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So your mother, your biological mother stipulated for you guys to be adopted, you had to be adopted together.
Yes. That
Wow.
was her
That's
request.
awesome.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And so
Well,
we
you
were
gotta
born
talk.
in Yeah, we were born in July, and we came home to our parents that adopted us in December. We were, of course, preemies. My brother was a pound and a quarter, and my sister and I were 2 pounds each. So we were in, the incubation for a while, and then we came home in December. And that's all I know, that from very early on, the decision was made immediately. In fact, I'll go into that later as we continue. The seed of rejection was planted early on, and so
Girl,
we started the
you
journey.
you done got it started already with the seed of
Yeah,
rejection.
it
And
was
you know
it
how
was
you like to just drop those
yeah,
nuggets
I did.
and keep on going, like you just said, drop a major bomb. The seeds of rejection start
It was in the
even
womb.
then.
It was in the womb. It was in the womb. She,
Wow.
God bless her. I love who we were adopted to. And I'm really humbled to celebrate my mom, for the decision that she made, because it truly was out of love. Now, of course, when you're growing up, you don't know that. You have no clue. All you know is that you're rejected. Nobody wanted you. And even when you get the best care, even though my parents gave us the best growing up, there was always that hole missing inside of me. So, my siblings, they can tell their own story, but I'm going to tell it from my perspective. And so for
That's
me,
right.
I just always felt empty, and as I grew older, I realized it was that seed of rejection that was from early on. Like in the womb, she had already made that decision.
Wow. So let me ask
Yeah.
you, how old were you when you found out that you were adopted?
We were
And what
11
was
or
that
12 years
like?
old. Well, my
Okay. So
mom
in the
has
middle,
one version. My mom has one version of
no,
how we
they always
found
have a
out.
different
And I have a different version. But praise God, I do remember she did give us a book. There was like this Caucasian little boy on it and said, I'm adopted. But I remember it was my grandmother, she's deceased now, but she slipped up and told a story about it. And that's how I found out that we were adopted. And so I wanted to know at like 17 years old, I wanted to find my birth mom. And unfortunately, at that time, my siblings weren't on board. And my mom, for her own reasons, I guess, as a woman, it wasn't okay with her. So for 20 years nearly, I withheld my desire to want to know. I had questions. And so it was through just journeying and ministry and success, but still that emptiness, no peace, no joy on the inside,
time.
and yeah, and it was just through life happenings. I'm making it sound like it was so easy, but it really wasn't. Like I really went through some hurdles, some poor decisions in my early 20s and 30s, looking for love in all the wrong places,
Of
validation,
course,
affirmation,
of course.
looking for our spiritual guidance and these people to affirm us and validate us. Because you have that abandonment and rejection and loneliness, and no matter how much measure of success you get on the external, the internal, until you get that healing, is jacked up. And so when life started to happen and I got sick and I coded out for 8.5 minutes, one of my girlfriends sat at my bedside at the hospital. She
Wait,
said,
wait, 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 Tata. I keep telling you, you can't tell a story just like that because you used to hearing the story.
yeah,
Okay, you just dropped a loaded word called coded. Okay,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
coded for 8 minutes. You just said,
Mhm. Yep,
what
yep,
a miracle you are.
yeah.
Oh my
Praise the
gosh,
Lord.
you coded for 8 minutes. And what
Yeah.
made you code? Did you take something? Were you trying to commit suicide? What was going on with you?
The truth of the matter, I had been going through sickness. There was a lesion on the right side of my brain. There was an injury. And so I went to the hospital. They had to do some studies for 72 hours. And I took some substance, and that's the truth. And I coded out. Now, the substance was supposed to make me go to sleep, not code. So I coded out. And then when I came to, I was mad at God that I came to. I was
Well,
mad that let's tell the truth and shame the devil. I
tell
was
it, honey.
mad because I was sick of the pattern that I had created because of lack of knowledge and not knowing who I really was. Because my mom and my dad were great parents, but I didn't know that some of the stuff that I was fighting internally did not belong to me. they belong to the generations before me and my biological roots. And so it was really a really good friend. She's my really good sister girl, sat at my bedside when I came to, and she just said, I think it's time. And she led me through a process within an hour. She went home, and within an hour, she said, pull up your laptop. I was finishing my doctorate in a hospital bed. And she said, pull up your laptop, scroll down. And then I saw, my biological mom. I typed out a sentence. I'm Torise. I think I'm your daughter. And from there on, we had communicated via love letters for about a good 8.5 months.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wow. But you didn't know.
I
And
didn't know.
you didn't know that it was because again, and I so appreciate you and you sharing the testimony. And again,
Yeah.
and we know these things that a lot of times when people come on the show, they're telling their
Hmm.
testimony in ways they've never shared it before.
Yeah, I've
Um,
never shared it like this. Nope.
and that's why I appreciate you and we honor your sacred story. So be
Yeah.
clear about that. We honor you in this space.
Yeah.
Um, what I felt was interesting that you said is that you had good parents, and so
Yes.
oftentimes we think of adoption, especially when kids are in care where they've already been rejected, and you think and you know who your parents were, right? It's not
Hmm.
like you didn't know. You see them, and they come and take you from them. It's
Yes.
like this whole adoption thing is supposed to be, the be all
Hmm.
and end all,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
there's still that feeling of rejection. That's an
Hmm.
abandonment that is difficult for children to comprehend, to even
Yes.
put language
Yes.
around what they're feeling. So then,
Yes.
we look at these kids that get adopted or people are adopted and just assume, well, you had good parents, you should be happy. Some of us biological parents, this is how people,
Right. Right.
some of our biological parents were worse than your adopted parents. But it
Yeah.
still doesn't change what that process can
Yeah.
leave inside of you. And so
Yeah.
you were struggling, and it's not, and again, you said you were
Hmm.
doing your doctorate, so it's not like you
Right.
were still
Right.
being accomplished and productive over
Right.
here, but emotionally you were struggling to the point where you were angry
Yes.
when you came to and was like, I didn't die. What is
Right.
going
Right.
what just happened? I was supposed to go meet the Lord, right? You think that you gonna land on Jesus' feet, that he understood, and you woke up
Yes.
in the lap, and here
Yes.
you are, still with tubes on you, woke up
Hmm.
with your girlfriend saying, we're gonna work this out. We're gonna
Yes.
go
Yes.
on this healing journey.
Hmm.
Thank God for
Hmm.
good friends.
Oh, the
Thank
really
God
best of
for
friends.
discernment, though.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
friends who can see beyond where you were and what was happening
Yeah.
and
Yes.
saw what you needed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so she helped facilitate you meeting now
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
biological mother.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. And
Yeah.
what was
And
that like?
yeah. The story is full circle because when we think about the definition of adoption, it's about us being able to, get the full, capacity of becoming legal members of another family. But the flip side of adoption is that you also still have those generational and psychological attachments to your biological roots. And so when I found my mom, she was an author. Now look at where I am now, full circle, right? And so when I was younger, there were some things that took place in my house, and I was called a storyteller because I told the truth and I wasn't believed. And so I share this part because it came full circle when I met my mom and found out she was an author. And God knows now I am an author of 9 books. And so the beginning journey was just a beautiful love story because she's a writer, so we just corresponded via letters for a very long time. I mean, long, lengthy emails. But then along the road, it got challenging because family, that raised me were hurt. And I understand that now in maturity. At the time, I didn't because I was just like, but I have a right to know. And even though I
Right.
still had a right to know, there was a grace that needed to be done about it, because like I said, the unfortunate part about it's the beautiful thing about being a triplet, but the unfortunate part is that your actions impact them. And so, even though I had a right, they weren't on board. And so it created some friction. And so there was separation in reference to corresponding. But the initial stages was beautiful. And I got to know that she made the best decision for her. And that was the best, beautiful gift of love to let go. We don't realize that at the time. All we know is you didn't want us. And especially when you find out that they have children after you. So what was wrong with us, right? What happens with that, right?
Were
And
you
I don't
were
want
you angry initially with her? Were you angry with her? What did you have those probing questions as to why us and
you
like
know,
what happened?
see, that's one thing I didn't have. Now, my siblings may have a different experience. I never was upset with her. I never was angry. That was never my issue. For me, and you know me, I'm a thinker. So for me, I just had questions. Well, what made you make the decision? Or what went on in the womb? Because I'm highly spiritually intelligent. So I knew fighting warfare and demons, because the spirit of adoption, the orphan spirit, carries warfare. It carries warfare for the person that's being adopted, and it carries warfare for the people that are adopting you. And so people don't
Wow.
know, people don't realize that. So the orphan spirit carries that. And so I was going through warfare. So I really just wanted to know more about her, so I knew how to encounter the enemy. Because some stuff, like I said, I knew was Torise, but then there was some stuff that I knew just did not belong to me. This was from patterns of, and so when I found out her story, then I realized, oh, this is why I'm struggling emotionally. This is why no matter how good I do or how much and I realized there was from both sides. And so I met her first, and then my dad came along 3 years ago, where I met him face to face, and that was a beautiful experience too. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. So
yeah.
you met your father just 3 years ago.
Just 3 years ago.
Just
He
three
knew
years.
about me 6 years ago, but he wasn't ready. He was not ready because he thought that I would feel some type of way about him. But that wasn't the case. I just wanted to know my dad, and it was God rest his soul. He passed away in October. In this season of COVID, but it was through his relationship that I got keys to the kingdom in a way that I never knew. Like, we've always possessed keys as ambassadors of Christ, but
Right.
knowing who my father was, even though my father that raised me was the bomb.com in my eyes, right? But finding my biological father just sealed the spiritual DNA and also my physical DNA to get the inheritance that I knew I had. And so when I knew that access, girl, stuff started to fall off me. Those, sinful ways fell off me. Let's just say it as a woman. Some of that stuff that I thought I needed to do, wanted to do, it fell off me because, look, I was the apple of my father's eye,
Wow.
and yeah, it was a beautiful gift. And we fell in love with each other instantly. Like, and from the gate, he made it clear whatever I have you need, is yours. And that was something that I needed because I lost my father that raised me early on at 19. So, I became real grown up real early, and so being, single and taking care of myself for so long, and now having someone that would say, hey, what do you need? Are you okay? That meant the world to me. It meant the world to me.
Wow. Well, let me ask you, your adoptive parents, when you
Hmm.
started on this journey, I can imagine it was, and let me just tell my experience. And I used to be an adoption case manager
Yeah,
when I worked
yeah.
for ACS. So I was at termination hearings.
Hmm.
Where I was terminating parental rights, and
Hmm.
just the trauma of that experience for
Yeah.
children. And I always tell the story of being in the court, and this is when I knew I needed to get out of direct service, being in the court all day with the little boy, and we were waiting
Yeah.
for him to produce his father from prison.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they took all day to produce this man. Like, we were probably at 4:30 when they brought him through the courts, and he
Wow.
came in shackled with hands and feet shackled,
Mhm.
and the
Mhm.
little boy went to go run, daddy, and all of the court officers swooped him up, wouldn't let him touch his father. So he was crying, I was crying,
Mm.
oh, touch his daddy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right, right.
Oh, it was just horrible. It was traumatic. Okay. I was like, I clearly need to stop doing this. I'm in the court crying with the kid. I couldn't offer no consolation. We both were just laid out like, what are you doing? He waited to see that's his father, and his wife is not gonna say it. I'm trying to navigate through tears. I knew that's what I needed to get out of direct service. But I've watched the trauma of these
Yeah.
processes. I've been but I've also been on the side of adoption hearings,
Yes.
right, where
Yes.
everyone's seemingly happy and all of this, but I I, I was often torn, and I watched the children be torn
Yeah.
between trying to divide their loyalty, right?
Absolutely.
Trying to understand that, or struggling to understand. And we saw this just as a foster system. My mom can
Yeah.
attest to this. Trying, like they felt like they couldn't love us
Mm-hmm.
because if they loved us, that somehow was rejecting their biological family. And so we got the bitter end of it, of the
Yeah.
acting out and the anger because they want
Yes.
to love us. They had a good day, but now they're mad that they had a good day because a
Yes.
good day means that
Yes.
somehow they're moving away from their loyalties.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only imagine for you, and you tell us, what was that like once you realized I found
Yeah.
my biological mother?
Yeah, you said you hit it dead on, T. Because I struggled because I won because all my life up until like early, like maybe 20, when you're a triplet, we do things together. Our spirits are intertwined, and for such a major decision for me to make, I had to do that alone. There was no permission to say, "I got your back. It's okay. Let's do this together." It was such a private matter. And so, and one sibling was on board, but
Can I just ask you before you go on, was that your
sure.
personal decision to do it alone, or did your siblings not want to participate?
Well, at the time, only one sibling knew because I was very clear the other sibling was not on board. And I didn't want to create more friction because that had been going on, like I said, since I was 17. Since I was 17, I wanted to know. So it was no secret at 33 when I made the conscious decision. And so the one, sibling gave me permission, but he just was not on board with going through the process that I went through. But he gave me his blessing, and so that gave me the strength. But I met them, met her on my own, and it was a beautiful experience initially. And I do talk about that in an anthology that I'm releasing actually this Saturday. Actually, that story because when I came home, see, it didn't feel good. There was melancholy. There was, all those things because of expectations. Expectations denied. And so, but I was willing to go the distance to find more information about her. And through that, it was through actually loving her and seeing, that relation form that I got to respect my biological, my adopted mom more. Our relationship had been
Okay.
strained, but, and she probably doesn't even know to this day. It was through the walks of discovery that I got to appreciate my upbringing in the best ways, not just for what we had materially, but even for the painful points that happened in our home that we could not share. I got to appreciate her in a better way because of finding out that, hey, had I been here, I would not have been who I am today. So it was a blessing that I was raised under discipline, obedience, and
Right.
that
Right.
strict authority that, of course, growing up, you're resisting because it's like, why can't I
Right.
get the mom that braids my hair and bakes cookies and all these things? I got G.I. Jane, but, it's,
GI
community activist.
holiness, GI
Yeah,
holiness Jane.
yeah, she's awesome woman, awesome. My mom is a beast, my mom that raised me. But at the time growing up, I was just like, I just want a hug, I want this. You think that's your love language, you want that. But it was finding out my mom and just learning more about her, respecting her for who she was or is, that I just, it really started a greater appreciation for how I was raised and how it came full circle that the pieces that my parents that raised me gave serve for who I am today. And even it was just the seed of authorship that my mom, biological mom, gave me, it's made me who I'm becoming. And so it
Man.
was such a beautiful journey that, I still marvel at, that God gave me the grace to go through it, even in the friction. Because, like I said, that it still causes friction sometimes in some ways now, because we were not allowed to talk about it. Like, even daring to have this conversation right now, it takes
Wow.
courage,
Wow.
because,
Yes.
when your family's not on board with a personal decision that God is telling you to do so that you can be healed and whole and live your best life according to what He wants you to do. Because as long as a matter is concealed, you will never be healed. And so I needed to know some things so that my identity, not just the identity of Jesus Christ and God our Father, yes, that's more than enough. But
Right.
sometimes we hide our spirituality from needing to know the reality of our life. And I needed to know. That was my story. I needed to know where I came from so that I know where I was going, and I knew how to fight the enemy in ways that I did not have mastered at that point. And so it was important to me.
Well, let me ask you this. Were you afraid? Like, what was some of the things you were afraid of? Because, again,
Yeah,
you've been blessed, right? And we have to acknowledge you've been blessed on both ends, that even when you
yeah.
found your parents, they
Mhm.
eventually, even if it took dad a little bit of time, was
Mhm.
willing to like have you in their lives, right?
Yeah.
We do know there's so many who never even get that after they
Mhm.
find their
Mhm.
biological parents.
Mhm.
That they,
Mhm.
people are still maybe in those spaces of rejection and those
Yes.
spaces of, shame. And a lot of
Mhm.
people fueled by the shame that then
Yes.
don't want to really be in that person's life or have that relationship. Were
Yeah.
you afraid that that was what was going to be the
Oh,
outcome?
definitely afraid, for my mom more than my dad. I was afraid of, especially because of loyalty to to my side that adopted me. I was very loyal to them, and I was afraid that what would happen did happen. The division, because I can't imagine as a woman my mom taking three of us in. She didn't have to choose all three of us, right? But she took all three, and then the child I gave everything to now doesn't want me. So it's rejection on their side too. How they might feel. But of course, I was afraid that would she love me? Would she like me? And all those things. And some of them are still true, in reference to it's not a unique relationship that I thought that I wanted. And so a lot of times we think what we really was missing that we
Mhm,
need. And the truth be
mhm.
told, I didn't. I wasn't missing anything. I wasn't missing, anything in that sense outside of the knowledge of knowing who she is and knowing her story and just knowing the power of love and forgiveness and understanding. But in reference to, what I thought I was missing with that mother wound, that was never that wasn't, the happy ending, that I would have thought I had. So it was that fear of like, oh, would I be enough for her? Why wasn't I enough? Or what was the real deal? And so I got her side, then I got my dad's side, and then God just revealed the whole truth of the matter. And I've got peace with it. I've got peace with it. You know, so
Did you have to forgive her and him?
I did. Now there's a different space, I guess, with daddy's little girl teeth. That. There's always a different space. Um, And so I did have to forgive both of them. I really did. And so much for, I guess, because they were so close in proximity.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So it wasn't like, sometimes you adopt and you go to a different state or you're different, whatever. But it was so close in proximity, that I didn't, I couldn't understand how no one could find us being that close. But
Right,
it was a closed experience, so it wasn't set up that way. So it was designed for it to be a private matter, and so
right.
that created explosion because a private matter became public because of a decision that I made, and so, that fear did create some tension on both sides. But thank God, like all of us are healing in our own space, and we communicate and love each other to the best of our abilities. And God has shown me how to repair the breaches, on all sides. That He has to give me the courage
Amen.
and the grace to repair the breach on all sides. Because although I had a right, I did have a right, still have a right. All of us have a right. But I would encourage those that are adopted that there's a level of grace in how you move because it does impact other people. And you don't want to forsake the people that did reach out and loved you in a place and chose you in the place that God designed especially for you. Because God doesn't want us to be out there orphans. And so, his word tells us in Ephesians 1 and 5 that, we're his children and we're supposed
Right.
to be into loving families. And so if we're sonships of God, then we accept the favor and the love of God versus orphans. They always seek validation and external things to validate them versus when you know who you are in Christ. There's no fear. There's no fear. You forgive and just know that the right choice was made for them at the best time of all of their lives. And I just, and I love it. I love it. I love it now. Of course, going through it, you're like,
Right.
oh my God.
Right.
So I don't want to
Right.
make it sound like a fairy tale, but I can say I can pivot and see God at every stage, even when it was really hard. And even at times when it's still hard, where my siblings, there's not the connection that I want that we used to have because of this decision that I made. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So then, understanding that God allowed you now to kind of go full circle, right? You've
Yeah.
gone full
Yeah.
circle.
Yeah.
Um, but in the midst of that circle, you had those bumps, you had those bruises, you had those experiences. How, I guess the question is about mental health, right?
Yes. Yes.
What did you do to get on that healing journey? Like what did you need or what did you find when it comes to how it was impacting your mental health
Yeah.
mm, that when did you wake up and realize, wow, this is really impacting my mental health over here?
Yeah, yeah, because it was impacting relationship skills, being by yourself, unbondable. Every single woman's not single just because they want to be single, it doesn't happen like that, whether it's trust issues, relationship issues, being unbondable, not knowing how to be in relationship because you don't have those
Okay,
relationships,
wait. You dropped another word. I think I didn't hear that word. Did you just say unbondable?
Unbondable. You become unbondable human beings. You become a vagabond, running here and
Wow.
there because you feel like you don't belong anywhere. Now, the
Wow.
flip side of that, there was a mark from the beginning, so I was never supposed to fit in. But when you're growing up, you don't know that. You just feel
Right.
unwanted and lonely. So I was, and so when we study those seeds of rejection, we have to really kind of dig up and keep pulling up those roots because rejection, it shows up as rejection, abandonment. But there's other stuff that's underneath that we really have to unveil and uncover and unpack. And so, really, look, I had to go to therapy when I started to make poor choices chronically.
Chronic.
I was chronically making poor choices. I was chronically killing myself slowly. And even though I wasn't a drug addict and I wasn't out there sexting, there was still other stuff that just were sinful and not right or beneficial. And so a lot of times we just want to look at those major things that people do and judge them. But we have our own private addictions. And so when I started to see that pattern and see that I would be good for a good long time, girl, and then go right back there, something would trigger me. And so finally, when I coded, that was the pivotal moment. It's, in this new chapter of a new book called on Unveil Transparency, Battle Scars Unleashed, that's releasing on Saturday. My chapter is called The Injury That Led to an Invitation. And it was the injury of a
The
brain injury that,
injury,
yeah.
say it
Mhm,
again though. The injury that led to
led to a divine invitation. And it was
wow.
through that injury and sitting in that hospital, and when my good girlfriend and two other friends loved me enough without shame or judgment, without throwing Christ in my face or any of that, they just said, girl, in a nice way, you need to figure out who you are. That's the problem. And so when I found out 7 years ago, July in 2013, when I started that journey, I tell you, it has been, the healing has been ever since. And just constantly digging up the root, dealing with the trauma and no more hiding the secrets, because we could not tell people that we were adopted. And so when you have secrets like that, not even just saying it, it doesn't nullify that I had great parents. But the fact that I couldn't even mention it, it bothered me. And I felt like my whole life was a lie. When I would go to the doctors and there would be sickness, I could never tell the truth because I didn't have enough information. And so people don't realize
Right.
that, like, adoption and stuff is not even just about trying to shame your parents. It's not about trying to right or wrong. Some stuff is just medical purposes. I needed to know what was going on. So when I start filling out those papers, I could tell the truth. When they ask you your medical history, you sit in your line like, oh no, I don't have that in my family. You don't even know it. And
Right.
so people don't
Right.
realize that that's a grace that the other side of our parents that did take us in, there needs to be that grace. That maybe some things they do need to know just so they can stay alive. And so
Right.
that's what, I needed therapy for that because I was chronically getting sick, and it has to do with something in my bloodline. That it had I not gone through those walks, I would probably not be here.
Wow. Wow. I love that you are being though so transparent to the point that there's not this isn't a in a box wrapped up happy ending, because there's
Yeah.
still some strain, there's still some tension
Yeah,
at times, there's still some hurt
absolutely. Yes.
about what was your healing journey. And
Yeah.
so help us, because sometimes I think when we get on the healing journey, we
Hmm.
don't expect people to be wounded by our journey.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we feel a way about that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, it's my journey. Why are you wounded, right?
Right.
And we
Right.
don't
Right.
know how to have the grace for how our healing journey may
Yes.
impact others, especially
Yes.
when it's about secrets and it's around keeping appearances and image, right?
Yes.
And you just like,
Yes.
I'm done with all that. You don't want it. But if
Yes.
there other people aren't there yet, it
Yep.
still impacts them.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you get to the middle ground though? Because there has to be some level of grace on both sides. And
Yeah. Yeah.
does does the more of the weight fall on the parent for the child? Like, how does that work? What is that
Yeah.
supposed to look like?
Well, from my experience, I assumed that it would have fell on the weight of the parent because, I'm the younger in this experience. You have the wisdom. But it really, the weight fell on me, not for to disrespect her or even to make myself feel higher. The grace was given for me because of the mandate on my life. And so when you have that apostolic grace, there's a space that, so the weight was on me that I had to make it right. And so I had to really accept that they were hurt, and that however that showed up, whether they didn't want to speak or there was a breach with my family members on this side. So I had to respect that and walk away. But then on the flip side, the joy of meeting my father's side is they were so different and they completely accepted me. So from the very point, for the first time I met my dad, I had access to everything and everybody. And then I had extra siblings, and they just took me in. And so while there was a strain over here, God always sends a ram in the bush. He sends the ravens. And so
Hallelujah.
they were able to just confirm me, affirm me, love me in ways that I never got. So there was love language with discipline and order and work ethic that was awesome, but there wasn't love language with affection like that. Whereas my dad's side was very like, all right, girl, what you need? Let's feed you. Let's do this, blah, blah, blah. So it was such a balancing that gave me the grace to say, okay, they're upset. You do what you can when the Lord says go, and you love on them, but give them respect and give them, be patient with their healing process. Because, and as the Holy Spirit leads us, it's getting better. It's not easy, but it does get better. And so you just have to let him do it. But you cannot allow the disappointment to stop your appointment that God has given you. And God had told me from that point on in 2013, it's time to do this. You have to have the courage to do this because this is a blueprint for other people to follow. Because many people need to find out who they are. And this is the season, many women I'm coaching on the side to find out their biological parents and surrogates, because it matters. No matter how much we're called in Christ, no matter how much God is our Abba Father, He is our everything. But there are certain things in our realities team that we need to know, and it does make the difference. And so I can truly say I
Wow.
just had the grace to be patient with them. I still am patient with them, but I also too I love them in ways that I didn't get. I flood them with that love because it teaches them and points them to God, not me. Because of course on their side it's like, well, why does she love me if we treated her like crap? Or why does she want to be? But I don't have that in my spirit. He doesn't even allow me to operate like that. I just want to love you. That's all. I just want to love you and be loved.
Right.
And so you just have to do that as God leads. And everyone, when God says, gets a piece of it. I feel like sometimes I'm spread all over the place because I have so many dimensions of family,
Right.
mom's side,
Right.
dad's side, and then adopted side. And then you have church side. Then
Right.
you have all these. So
Right.
for a long time, I felt like, well, I don't belong anywhere. For a long time, I was like, I don't belong anywhere. But God just said, no, this is how I wanted your life to be. I chose you.
Wow.
I chose you.
So let me ask you, as we're starting to wind up, about writing about all of this. You mentioned
Yeah.
being an author of 9 books. I know you have an anthology getting ready to drop, or it's dropped
Yeah.
already, I think. It's dropped
It's dropped
already.
already. Now this one is
Um,
the latest, and this came after my dad passed away. And so this is with 9
that's
authors:
right.
Cecilia Aiken, Avalon Brown, Deborah Mann, Deborah McKinney, Aaron Lakes, Kristen Piper, Rolanda Piles, and Willa Reed. And so this is about 10 women coming together, sharing a journey, daughters of a king. And so I just wanted to celebrate both of my dads that were in my life, and how the journeys of fatherhood, faith, and forgiveness led me to such a stronger relationship with God. My relationship with God has always been on fleek since I was a little girl, but it was after that final chapter, girl, it just whoop, skyrocketed because it's like, oh
Yeah.
God, that's why. So yeah, this one's a
Wow.
good one. This is women talking about their journeys with their fathers, whether they were absent, whether they needed help forgiving their fathers for their addictions or not being present, or just some who just really had great experiences, or like mine, their fathers are dead, deceased. And how does that shape our identity now? Because I can say, since my biological father died, it shaped my identity in a different way. It did. It did.
Interesting. In
It
what
did.
way?
For a
Are you
minute,
still discovering that?
I'm still dealing with it. Yep, I'm gonna be real honest with you. Still dealing with it because
Well, it was just October. It's not like it was that long ago.
yeah, I was going to
So,
say right. It's only October, not even a full blown year. It's only like what 7 8 months. So still kind of dealing with that. Like, what does that look like? That both of my fathers are deceased.
right.
Both of them, 20 years apart, but they both impacted my life in such a major way. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm coming up on a year myself, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
um, there's so many stories, there's so many things to be told, but I
Hmm.
struggle with that, telling the story, especially the not
Yeah.
so pretty story, right? That makes it hard, but then still having that
Hmm.
feeling of, but as our resident therapist always tells us, that the shame lives
Hmm.
in secrecy, right? So
Yes.
how do you get healed when you're still bound by the silence because
Hmm.
you're afraid to uproot the image, right? You're
Say
afraid
it
to
again.
uproot the image, and or for people to do broad strokes. You know how you share a story about someone, or I
Yeah.
can remember being married, right? You go talk to your
Right.
girlfriend, my husband's on my nerve, and then girl, he ain't no good. No,
Right.
no, no, no. Let's just take that back a little bit, right? Like I don't need a broad stroke that he all the way no good. I just said it got on my nerve, right? So you
Right.
don't want
Right.
people to take
Right.
broad
Right.
stroke that the
Right.
person is
Right.
all bad, or
Right.
but so
Hmm.
so I admire that you are and have been courageous in
Yeah.
sharing your story, understanding the impact that it has, and has had,
Yeah,
and having
yeah,
faith in the patience for those people to come along, but not allowing
yeah.
it to hinder your healing
Mm-hmm.
journey. So kudos to you for
Mm-hmm.
that. There's so many stories that go with people to the grave because they were too
Yes,
afraid to tell
yes.
them, not because of the shame for themselves, but
Right.
because how somebody else in the family might feel. So,
Absolutely.
nobody wants to tell their uncle, such and such was a pedophile and was
Hello,
molesting all
hello,
the kids in the
hello,
family because,
hello.
even though he did, but everybody
Right,
gonna
right,
know and we hear
right,
about your
right.
uncle such a good person. So, there's so many stories and people come to me share those stories
Yes,
and we
yes,
take them and
yes,
we still don't speak about them.
yeah,
But kudos to you for sharing your story, for writing about your story, and
yes,
for charting a blaze for people to say it's okay that
yes,
you can manage, you can survive
yes.
the tumultuous emotional
Mm-hmm.
impact
Yes,
of
yeah,
finding your biological, I like
mm-hmm.
to say story, right?
Yes,
Because the
yes,
parents may not even be alive, they may not be there anymore,
mm-hmm.
they may
Mm-hmm.
still be in a space that you can't really have relationship, but still
Yeah,
finding your biological story,
mm-hmm.
understanding
Mm-hmm.
history, where you come from. And
Yes.
today, I did another DNA test. 'Cause I'm addicted to these DNA tests because I just want to try to this like which I'm telling the truth, right? But I did another one that told me based on
Okay.
my DNA what some diseases I
Yes,
may need to watch
yes,
out for,
yes,
right?
yes,
And my vitamin deficiencies and all this
yes.
stuff. So that stuff is real though. When you
No.
talk about knowing your DNA or knowing your
Mm-hmm.
medical history, that's
Yes.
real. It's
Mm-hmm.
real.
It's,
So you don't always need necessarily, not everybody's in a space that they still want to necessarily have relationship in that way, but
right.
just
Exactly. Just
knowing your
know. I need to
story,
know.
but
Mm-hmm.
knowing your story. And
Yeah.
I think we as Black people should
Thank
be
you.
able to resonate with that because,
Yes.
you know, so many of us have decided to try to figure
Yeah.
out our story all the way back to before we got into this transatlantic slave thingy that happened. Like
Yes.
who
Yes.
were we before we
Mm-hmm.
got kidnapped? Who were we
Right.
before
Right.
the devil
Right.
showed up? Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I just love this, and I hope people are feeling encouraged that if they don't know their families, and sometimes we know.
Yes.
I've got friends who knew who their fathers
Mm-hmm.
were, knew but
Yep.
never
Yep.
had any relationship, never pursued it,
Mm-hmm.
never wanted to know there's other
Yep.
siblings, didn't care because she the other or she was the other woman. Like we get
Mm-hmm.
so caught up in those
Yeah.
things that we miss out on such a beautiful, what could be a beautiful experience like you had.
Yes.
You
Yeah. A
would
defining
know
moment.
that love.
Mm-hmm.
Say
Mm-hmm.
it again.
It's a defining moment for all
Wow.
parties involved to get healed. For the people that adopted you, they need to heal from whatever the scars of not being able to have children, or the children you did take in, and they don't love you the way you would expect. But your biological parents, they need the space to be forgiven for the choice that they made when they were younger. And I can't judge my parents; they were young. And triplets, forget one child; they had triplets at a young age. I'm 42. I don't know what I would do at triplets right now. And I'm stable and steady and emotionally capable. So I don't even know what that looks like. So they get a chance to be forgiven. They get a second chance. And so
Yeah.
what maturity and wisdom allows you to see that your courageous act allows every party to receive whatever piece of healing and restoration God wants for them. And my siblings, in some way, whether they're on board or not, they respect the decision. They don't like how it's impacted, but they respect me for it because in some ways they want to know. They just don't have the capacity to do it yet. And so,
Right.
so yeah, so you get to be a blueprint. And so even when it's hard, God said you have to go because this is bigger than you. This is bigger than Tories. It involves me, but this is so much bigger than
Right.
me.
Right.
It's about other
Oh, look
people
at it.
getting their lives in order. Get it
Yeah.
together. Get it together. Come together.
it's definitely a part of your purpose. We can see it in
Hmm.
your writings and your being here and just what God has for your life, right? So
Yeah.
you see it now. I think understanding that it's National Foster Care Month. Um,
Yeah.
I just want all of us to think and pray for children who
Yes.
are and wanting and longing for that
Hmm.
adoptive
Yeah.
home, wanting to be, and that these kids would be placed with people who can genuinely love them.
Amen.
As a case manager, I oftentimes saw foster parents who were in it for the
Hmm.
money. They weren't
Yep.
in it for they weren't
Yep.
in it because they just knew children. They needed
Hmm.
income, and so they
Hmm.
had space, and they got all these
Hmm.
kids, and they treated them
Hmm.
poorly. I've seen it
Yep.
with kinship homes. I saw it with, and
Yes.
you just
Yeah.
see the residue. And I would watch them. I remember leaving ACS, going to be a probation officer, and I would see some of the same kids go from one system to the next.
To the
So they
next.
left the care systems to go
Hmm.
into the criminal justice system, right?
Yes.
And
Yep.
then I used to have young girls when my first job out of college was as an independent living case manager, and that was
Yeah.
they were getting ready to age out, and how many thought they needed to link up with a man, especially an older
Yes.
man that can take care of them,
Yeah.
because they didn't have nobody and they weren't
Provider.
really
Yeah.
they weren't
Yeah.
set up to succeed. And Deirdre Oliver, who's watching, and I'm telling you, she has a phenomenal organization. We're gonna have her
Wow.
on
Yeah.
to just talk more
Definitely.
about this because but I think this is these are children and young people on the margins that we have
Yes.
forgotten about, right?
Yeah.
And now with
Hmm.
the pandemic, there's probably even more who've lost parents and now are living with aunts and uncles who resent their presence being there, right?
Yes.
Who don't like having to take on that was so
Yes.
there's a lot of intercession we have to
Yeah.
have and get the kids with special needs that they
And to
try to
preserve their minds. It affects
yeah,
their minds. Rejection, abandonment, loneliness, all isolation, alienation, feeling forgotten, forsaken. It impacts the mind. And this is where the church really has to get a little bit more sensitive. The kingdom of God needs to become very sensitive and aware that the way people are behaving sometimes has nothing to do with what you think. Some of these things that have been embedded in your system,
okay,
in your soul, has to do with someone dropped me, someone mishandled me, someone didn't love me, or then I got placed in a home that should have loved me and they messed it up. So now you got the double offense. And then that's what affects our mental health. And it takes a long journey of spiritual, physical, emotional, friendships, relationships, surrogates, mentorship, exercise, holistic eating, all those things to allow the full picture and the full measure of God's glory to manifest in our life. But I would charge the church, not just the systems and government and the systems of where you've been such a blessing to people in the courthouse and these agencies, but I would challenge the church to be a little bit more equipped and sensitive in those areas that most of our traumas and troubles start from childhood somewhere and be sensitive to that.
yeah,
That that's their soul has been hurting. So stop
be
expecting
trauma informed, yes,
yeah, you're expecting
be
them to change something that's been going on for decades. It's not gonna happen like that. It does not happen like that. It doesn't happen like
and
that.
and we love to preach the Mephibosheth, right? Story
Yes,
where
say it again. Say it again.
we love to go to that
Mm.
story, but nobody
Right,
talks about from him being dropped to when David realized he was still alive, what his
right.
life could have been like, and
Yeah,
what that might have meant for him. We rush to the
yes,
victory, we
yes,
rush to the
yes.
highlight, right? That we
And you
don't
don't talk
talk
about
about
in the meantime. The meantime
in the
was a
interim.
whole lot. Yeah,
There was
there's a
a
whole lot of
whole lot
struggle.
that he could have dealt with and
Yes.
was dealing with that could have made him even really not handle what the king was giving him well in the first place. So we
Mm-hmm.
don't hear the whole story. But and
No.
to your point, that's why we got to be trauma informed because
Yes.
we don't get it all, right?
Mm-mm.
People are living oftentimes out their
Yes.
experiences, whether
Yes.
subconsciously or consciously, they're living
Yes.
out the reactions to experiences, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
making decisions from the as a reaction to things that have
Yes.
happened to. And even when
Mm-hmm.
they join our churches, they are often coming from places that they've been wounded or that may have
Yes.
triggered something else. And we
Mm-hmm.
have to start understanding and being more trauma informed. It's 9:59.
Yeah.
I so
Yeah.
appreciate you, my sister. I love you. You know I do.
Me
God just
too.
connected us, brought us together. And for that, I am grateful.
Yes.
Again, your latest book is A
Yes.
Daughters
Daughters,
of the
Daughters of
King.
the King.
You
Yep.
order it
Yep.
on Amazon. They can, but we prefer you order it from a place to
From
consider.
absolutely, absolutely,
A place
absolutely.
to consider.com is
Yes.
where they can get. Thank you, Deirdre. And again, I love what this woman does, and we're going to have her
Yes.
on as well. Um, but thank you, Dr.
You're
Therese. Thank you for
welcome.
your willingness to always come on Teachers, Rants, and Musings, always come dropping nuggets for us. We appreciate you. You
You're
guys
welcome.
continue to invite people to come and join in because again the whole point is so we can be on this healing journey together. You don't have to do it alone, right? We can have just one day a week that we come together to talk about this healing journey, to do healing work, to think of things in a different way, right? So thank you guys for joining. Please be sure to connect with me on Instagram. Connect with me on YouTube, especially if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel. It's hashtag healing is the only agenda. Please do so. Y'all know I got to get my social media up. Okay. And I will see you again next week. And hopefully we'll have Deirdre on. I'll let you know. Definitely. Good night. Okay. You guys be safe and God bless.